gentlemen, I'm Bob Wiseman, Chair of the Third Digital Transformation in Government Conference, and we have the pleasure today to welcome the new Chief Data Officer of the Government of Canada, along with some of his major, some of his key executives that work for him. Stephen Burt, who's a new CDO. Okay, basically, he became Chief Data Officer in March of 2022. He came in from D&D in Defense, where essentially he was the Director of Defense Data Innovation and Analytics. And before that time, he's worked extensively in the intelligence fields. He has a degree in history from the University of Ottawa, as well as a master's in public administration from Queen's University in Kingston. Robert Trottier, okay, he graduated from the IMIT Management Development Program in 2012 and currently occupies a position of Executive Director, Information and Data Governance in the Treasury Board of Canada's Treasury Board Secretariat. He's responsible for developing a framework for information and data governance, which is absolutely critical. He's Benoit Dehaye. We're very fortunate to have this gentleman here. He's the Acting Director of Data and Artificial Intelligence, okay, Office of the CIO. He studied computer science at Carleton, and he's basically directing the development and the directive on automated decision-making, which has a large ethical dimension to it, and I'm sure he'll elaborate on that. And then we have the Executive Director for Information and Privacy Policy, Jennifer Schofield, and she's been leading government-wide policy work related to access to information, proactive publication and privacy, and data protection. She started in government in 1999, and she has a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, along with a minor in law from Carleton University. So without taking up any more of your time, I'm going to be passing it over to Stephen Burt, and he's going to be chairing the panel discussion on the new developments in the Chief Data Officer organization. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Bob, and bon après-midi, mesdames et messieurs. Thanks very much for inviting us today to the third annual Digital Transformation in Government Conference. Very happy to have this opportunity to share some information about the new Government of Canada Office of the Chief Data Officer. My name is Steve Burt. I'm honored to be here today as Canada's first Chief Data Officer. As Bob said, I came into this job about 3.5 months ago. And I'm going to be from D&D, and I'm going to be moderating today's session, speaking on our new organization's priorities, how they relate to digital transformation in the Government of Canada, and how we're supporting the advancement of the government's digital ambitions. As part of the Office of the Chief Data Officer, I'm joined today by Benoit Dehaye, Director for Data and Artificial Intelligence, as Bob said, Jen Schofield, Executive Director for Privacy and Data Protection, and Robert Trottier, Executive Director for Information and Data Governance. So throughout the session, feel free to share your questions below. We will do our best to answer as many as possible during the Q&A portion in the later half of the session. So a few remarks from me first. I guess I would say I've been lucky, fortunate to over the last 4 years from the national defense standpoint, to be able to participate in and have some influence on the growth and maturity of the data community across the Government of Canada as we were building up the data practice within defense itself. And I've joined the Office of the Chief Information Officer here at Treasury Board Secretariat while we're undergoing a reorganization for better support of efficient and effective implementation of government policies and programs that will enable the delivery of secure, reliable, and user-centric digital services that Canadians expect from their government. The work here at Treasury Board Secretariat is really about addressing key challenges and capturing opportunities to create tangible and lasting benefits government-wide for clients and employees. And as the new Chief Data Officer here for government, my vision is to create a more cohesive enterprise across departments and agencies, which would include a framework of agreed standards for data that we can all work within, strengthening the foundational depth in areas of governance and stewardship that will allow data sharing and interoperability, and last but not least, taking a disciplined approach to delivering specific data-enabled capabilities that will provide tangible improvements to government as well as to citizens. So I have 4 specific priorities I want to touch on and mention to you all for 2022. We'll evolve this as we go, but starting out and building the organization, there are 4 things I've identified to the team here, as well as to departments and agencies that we're working with. The first priority is going to be renewing the Government of Canada data strategy in collaboration with the Privy Council Office and Statistics Canada. We're going to build on the work from the 2018 report to the Clerk of the Privy Council on a data strategy roadmap. And we're going to take stock of how far we've come over the last 4 years and then hold ourselves to account a little more in a little more focused way than we did previously in terms of what we're going to deliver for the following 2 or 3 years. The goal is to deliver the refreshed data strategy by the end of this calendar year, and then have a 3-year implementation plan with that will take us into 2023 and beyond. So that's going to be the first priority. It's going to be a fair amount of work between now and the end of December. Second priority is to govern data and information as strategic assets. We talk about that a lot, but I think we've got to put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, and actually start to do it. This will include developing and implementing enterprise standards for data and information accessibility, for quality, exchange and reuse, while also protecting privacy and personal information while we do all of that. A fair amount of work there as you can imagine, across the multiple departments and agencies and the many more data sets and the vast holdings we have across the federal government. My third priority is to support and or lead the delivery of a variety of projects that require sustained effort across the Office of the Chief Information Officer. So there's a variety of projects and initiatives that are going to require a number of us to sort of work together to make sure that we deliver some tangible new capabilities for Canadians. If you'll ask questions about that, happy to get into it in a little more detail. And then finally, my fourth priority is building up the data sector itself, right? This is a new thing within government. We've talked data a fair amount over the last 4 or 5 years, but actually building up the sector here within Treasury Board Secretariat by bringing together some existing elements of the structure here within OCIO in the information management, privacy, and data areas, but also building out some new capabilities, particularly aligned with the work of the Chief Technology Officer to make sure that we're building, as we build and refresh some of our systems, we are actually able to do data a little more smartly than we have in the past. So the format today, I'm going to ask a series of questions to Benoit, to Jen, and to Robert, and they're going to give you their thoughts on a few things here. And then, like I said, if you want to fill in your thoughts and questions in the chat portion of your interface here, then we'll turn to those in the second half of the session. So to begin, a question for Benoit to start. In 2018, the Clerk of the Privy Council released, as I mentioned, a report on a data strategy roadmap for the Federal Public Service. While we made some progress on implementing recommendations, it's now time to really advance this. Benoit, would you be able to elaborate on the details and goals of the updated data strategy?
Yes, of course. A lot has changed since 2018. So we need to renew the data strategy to adjust to this different context that we have now, and also to reflect the increased maturity of public service with regards to data. Since the publication of the 2018 strategy, the public service has taken actions in many areas, and this includes over 40 departments having created their own data strategy in alignment with the report to the clerk. Many departments have also named a chief data officer, and the Government of Canada named the chief data officer. That's you, Stephen. The data community was also established, and they co-managed the GC Data Conference, which grew to be one of the largest conference, if not the largest conference organized by the Government of Canada. We also stood up many of the working groups and committees that we need to effectively share information and find solutions to common data challenges that we face. And departments got connected to cloud providers, giving them access to modern infrastructure, tools, and storage to manage, use, and share their data. At PBS, we published the Policy on Service and Digital that created responsibilities for our leaders to manage data more effectively, and so on. So with this solid foundation in place, as you said, we're now ready to accelerate the public service use of data to support decision-making and improve our service and operations. It's also key that we maximize the value of the data that the Government of Canada holds for Canadians while also maintaining their trust. So that's the goal of the renewed strategy. With the new strategy, we'll identify concrete actions that will improve how we use data to make informed decisions and deliver services. And in the strategy, we'll outline specific steps and assign responsibilities to key individuals or organizations to achieve these goals. And we'll align the strategy with the new horizontal initiatives and whole of government priorities, for example, climate change and digital ID. Also, when I look today at how departments manage their data, I'm often very impressed by the approaches and the methods that they've adopted. But government-wide, we can do better in a lot of areas. In some areas, we have good maturity. So, for example, how we protect privacy and secure data, or our approach to open government. But when it comes to interoperability, to data sharing, to our approach to data quality, we need to improve in those areas. So part of what we want to do with the renewed strategy is highlight some of the great work that's taking place in departments and identify opportunities to take that work and scale it to the whole of Government of Canada. This will help break down the departmental silos, reduce duplication of effort, and also foster more consistent practices across the GC. After the release of the 2018 strategy, there was a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of action taken to realize the strategy. But over time, the energy lost focus a little bit. It was replaced in a sense by many grassroots initiatives, which is really great, but some of it lacked coordination. So with this new strategy, we'll also help everyone align in the same direction so that the efforts of working groups, of departments, of different domains and clusters, well, can benefit the whole of government. And you spoke about, having tangible action. And if we look back at the 2018 strategy, a lot has happened since its release. But while we did a lot, we could have done more. This time, as opposed of instead of a roadmap of recommendations, we're looking to bring forward a strategy with clearly identified priorities and actions. And we'll also assign those to as responsibilities for individuals or departments. And we'll have a more precise action plan and a robust approach to monitoring the work and reporting on it to make sure that things get done. So in conclusion, I think it's a really exciting time to be working in the data world within the government. The data strategy renewal gives us a great opportunity to prioritize key actions that are needed to improve how the government manages and uses data. It's critical that we design and deliver effective services and programs using this data, and that we can leverage it to make decisions, and that we continue to support transparency and foster trust in the government. And for those in the audience that are in the federal public service, I would say keep an eye out for engagement opportunities so that you can provide input to this new strategy. And with this, over to you, Stephen.
Merci, Benoit. I think that's a great lead-in for the next question to Jen. As we look at data-driven capabilities and how important they're going to be to determining the strength and success of Canada's social, economic, and national security policies in the 21st century, I'm really struck by how we need to get this right and ensure that we are enabling the services and capabilities that Canadians individually or as businesses and as a society as a whole are going to need. But at the same time, we also need to consider how it is safeguarded, how that data being used in those capabilities is safeguarded and trusted. Jennifer, can I ask you to speak on the role that privacy and data protection will play in advancing our digital ambition and data-enabled digital services and programs?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You'll hear us, I think, throughout the conversation talk about trust and how important it is in these data-enabled digital services. By way of privacy, I think it's imperative that Canadians have trust that their government is protecting this personal information and data as they're using it. So putting in place appropriate and rigorous privacy measures helps to assure Canadians that their personal information is protected while continuing to move towards more digital approaches in the delivery of government services. So the counter argument we often hear is that privacy stifles innovation or the barrier to information sharing, and it just doesn't have to be the case. So by building privacy into new digital initiatives right from the start and ensuring that protection of personal information and data is considered throughout the project lifecycle, we can be innovative and move great ideas forward while still protecting privacy, which then enhances the trust that Canadians have in federal institutions. As Benoit mentioned as well, this trust is really further developed by being transparent about what we're doing with personal information. What are we collecting? Why are we collecting it? What we're doing with it? How we're protecting it? And how long we're keeping it? Because privacy breaches can be damaging to public trust, and we want to be clear that we are taking this very seriously. So as you mentioned, Stephen, protecting personal information means you have to make sure that it's properly safeguarded. So this includes some more traditional measures like making sure it's locked in an appropriate cabinet and access is limited to those who need to know in systems. But as the government gets into more sharing of data and personal information across departments to enable these digital services or contracting out parts of service, it's really critical that privacy safeguards be included in contractual partnerships and information sharing agreements to limit the risk of breaches and to protect the personal information and data that's in there. And then where and if privacy breaches do occur, that they're appropriately managed and responded to. I also want to emphasize that protecting personal information encompasses more than just safeguarding of personal information. It means that the government is accountable and is limiting what it collects, how it uses and discloses information, and retains the information only as long as it's needed, maintaining the accuracy and then making sure, of course, again, that we're transparent in our practices. These, again, you'll hear the themes, I think, between all of our conversation, which is probably a good thing. But these sort of principles are the pillars of the government's commitment to advancing openness by default, privacy and data protection. We spoke a little bit of the building of recognizing the value of data as a strategic asset and being able to identify where data is personal information and protecting it accordingly is again part of building that public trust in. So as we move forward, it's key that privacy knowledge be included as an essential element of a digitally enabled public service. There's a real opportunity there to weave privacy and the protection of data that includes personal information into training efforts that develop skills and tools for a digitally enabled public service. So all of this foundational to supporting the government's digital transformation. So again, generally speaking, the protection of Canadians' personal information and upholding their right of access to their personal information and to correction are really essential to continuing to build and preserve Canadians' trust in the public service and advancing Canada's digital ambition.
That's great. Thanks, Jen. I really appreciate that. I guess the last question here, Robert, is for you. There are a lot of opportunities out there to harness our collective efforts so that we act in a more cohesive and coherent way when it comes to data. Can I ask you to touch on how the government is planning to govern data information as strategic assets, to put some oomph behind those words? How do you know that we are achieving the right outcomes? How will we know? And how will we bring data and the data and IM communities together to advance this?
Yeah, for sure, Stephen. Thank you. And this is really a great question. First, let me say that our ambition and also our main challenge to govern data and information as strategic assets will be to develop a framework that will actually bring together information management and data governance. We've spent a lot of time since the rise of the data agenda in the public sector on distinguishing between data and information. But often the distinctions we make are tenuous and ultimately, I believe, unhelpful. I also believe we can learn from each other. For example, for a new data practitioner in the public sector, the discipline of information management has a lot to teach in terms of risk management, guidance, and best practices. Likewise, for information management professionals, data governance provide a rich source of new thinking on how information can be managed within technology systems in a more digital way, moving us away maybe from digital paper into more digital management of information and data. So reducing, therefore, the burden on the end user, which I think is key in terms of outcomes. When you're speaking of outcomes, I think that burden on end user needs to be removed. So while there's a way to, there's always the element that remains distinct, there's increasing overlap on how these disciplines are practiced and opportunities to manage them more rigorously within a continuum. We've been managing information data for a long, long time, and we have huge capacity to create rules and put them in place. However, our rules are not necessarily freeing up organizations to take full advantage of their information and data holdings and to transform their operations. So we have to help make it so low risk to collect, to operationalize, and store a massive amount of data and information that departments and agencies will jump at the opportunity to fully transform their data and information practices. Of course, building trust, keeping the privacy and security in mind. So what I'm getting at here, Stephen, is we need to make it easy. To do this, we harmonize the policy and practices of information management and data governance to the extent possible and link these domains more closely together. This will provide modern ways of managing data and information as strategic assets and will support the government's legal obligations in areas such as access to information, privacy, litigation readiness, the implementation of the Library and Archives Act, and all kinds of other policy objectives. For example, we recently released a new standard on systems that manage information and data. The new standard provides the foundation on how we govern all of our content across the GC, regardless on which systems it's stored. We're also looking at the standards that we will need to support good governance. We recognize that we need to ensure we are using consistent language and ways to identify things across the GC. We're looking at what standards and practices we need to codify in policy. This includes things like standards on metadata and data quality. We will ensure that our new standards and guidance will reduce risks for departments and open new opportunities, as we'll be working with them every step of the way so that we get it right. To do this, we're setting up a new senior officials committee on data and information. Its mandate will be to enable the ethical use and management of data and information as strategic assets to help maximize the public value of data and information in the Government of Canada. This new committee will prioritize issues around data and information within the GC, digital governance structure, and this includes advancing data and information initiatives needed to drive digital transformation, seeking opportunities to support innovative use of data and information, and addressing data and information issues when it comes to the development and use of artificial intelligence. And the first meeting of this committee, by the way, is at the end of June. So we're really making progress towards that. To the other part of your question, how do we know we're achieving the right outcomes? Well, I think what gets measured gets done typically. So we'll monitor outcomes by putting in place a solid performance measurement framework built specifically for information and data. And on top of the annual assessment and oversight function that we perform here at TBS, we'll provide guidance and tools to departments and agencies, which you can use to monitor their own progress as well. So in conclusion, Stephen, in order to govern information and data as strategic assets, we need to make it easy for departments and agencies by reviewing and harmonizing our policies and tools. We need to leverage expertise from both information and data communities and address potential skills gap, put in place an enabling governance structure, and introduce a performance measurement framework to measure progress. And I think if we do all that, we're going to be that much closer to where we need to be.
Merci beaucoup, Robert. I think that's right. There's plenty to do here. So happy to explore these topics that we've touched on fairly briefly, or to go into other questions that may be coming from the audience. Bob, I'm happy to transfer control back to you if we have some questions coming in from folks. Otherwise, I've got a couple other things here I can follow up with people for. So what's your preference?
Helps if I unmute myself. Sorry, I should know that by now. Sorry. Okay, no, we got two questions here. Okay, so I'm just going to prove them here. Okay, and we'll see. Okay, when you say data, are you referring to both structured and unstructured? Okay, we're talking the difference between emails and the eDocs, Word Perfect. I'm dating myself. Okay, and Microsoft Office documents versus database stuff. So are you addressing both, or in the context?
Yeah, we've got to address both. I think and that's the reality of what I've asked Robert to do. And when we talk about information and data as strategic assets, he's brought in from it's existed for a long time the information management team under him, and the goal from my perspective is to marry that information management work, which is more classic unstructured records and a variety of other digital and electronic formats, but still largely unstructured. He's got to bring the governance rules we have around those together with the governance rules that we need to put in place for the more ones and zeros based data stuff inside IT systems. So we're going to have to address both structured and unstructured in this space to make sure that we actually have as much as possible, a consistent set of governance and management across the whole spectrum. Robert, is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
Maybe, Stephen, just to reinforce what you're saying is we have a long-standing tradition of records management, as you mentioned, in the GC, and this started with a paper-based history and what have you, and we've digitized and transformed as we went. But we're in a space right now with, just because of sheer volume, we can no longer rely on end users to pick the right metadata and to do the right things and to file their documents or what have you at the right place. And on the other side of the spectrum, when it comes to structured data, we need to also manage it throughout this life cycle. So when I was saying earlier that we can learn from each other and implement and bring those two committees or those two communities, two disciplines together, we need to be in a space where we can automate, where we can bring in the robots and really help manage throughout this life cycle the whole spectrum of information and data, whether it's structured or unstructured data, and put in place the right tools and principles and techniques to do that. And that's where I think the data community will really be helpful to take us out of this asset-free paper-based or digital paper-based approach and transforming our programs and services so we can be in more of a digital, in a digital space and really enable the proper lifecycle management of other holdings.
Yeah, it'll be interesting just from datafication point of view, where the unstructured data is turned by AI into structured data, and as well. Anyway, sorry, just another question. Will there be an effort to increase collaboration integration with IT, particularly for enterprise architectures, as things like the Enterprise Architecture Review Board seem still very IT focused?
Yeah, 100%. So that's a great question. I think one of the things I'm really enjoying about coming into the Office of the Chief Information Officer here, working for Catherine Luello, who's come in almost a year now from private sector, is that there's an effort ongoing to bring together a variety of streams of work here. So the structure in this office has long been a policy team and a technology team. Both those teams still exist, but we've supplemented that with a more specific data team, as well as a digital transformation team looking at the path that departments and agencies should be taking as they seek to become more digital. And last but certainly not least, a talent and community management team to get our arms around a little bit more what we're doing across departments and agencies with folks working in IT and information management and data, and bringing together all of these communities under a bit of a digital umbrella so that we align. So when you look at Jen, Robert, and Benoit here, Jen's team on the privacy side, becoming a little more data and digital focused in their work, but maintaining all of the privacy obligations and policy oversight that we've got. Robert bringing together information management and data governance. And then around Benoit's team, really building out what we're going to be calling data operations, right? Which is both the strategy and ethics and sort of more traditional TBS policy and oversight functions, along with architecture, standards, work that's got to be aligned with the chief technology officer, so that as we're building or revamping enterprise resource planning systems and whatnot, that we're actually putting more time and energy into things like architecture. I sit on the Enterprise Architecture Review Board. It is still very tech-centric, and we have some fairly elaborate architectures that are presented there, but what I find is they are sort of sculpted in loving detail around what the technology and the systems piece is going to look like, and then underneath all that, there's the data layer, and it's very perfunctory is perhaps too harsh. I mean, it's there, but it is a little more hand wavy in terms of what the thinking is as compared to the system stuff that's all around it. So we need to be more sophisticated in that piece. But that team, frankly, that's a new thing for Treasury Board. So building out that team is on the to-do list, but it hasn't been done yet.
Magic happens here type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
The question. Sorry, I've got another question. Sorry. Okay. And this is a good question because I've seen some CDOs have real problems. How's the scope of responsibility between the CIO and the CDO segregated? And are these roles linked?
Sorry, between who?
The Chief Information Officer and the Chief Data Officer.
So I think where we're heading with this, let me address that in two parts. Where we're heading with that at the Treasury Board Secretariat is really putting everything under a digital umbrella. So I think we will have, we have a set of ambitions in the digital space. We need to align technology, data, policy, and a variety of other things, talent to get those digital ambitions done. So I have to say, coming out of a line department and into the Secretariat here, what I'm really enjoying is having a CIO, and we're still calling it the CIO at this point, over top of all that, with that digital ambition, is that my priorities and the Chief Technology Officer's priorities and the talent guy's priorities and the policy person's priorities are all the same, which was not the case, shall we say, and continues to not be the case in a number of line departments. So that right there is a big refresh and a big significant boost in terms of empowerment, because we're all have the same number one, number two, number three, et cetera. So we're working together on that. How we do this across line departments, I think, is going to vary very much based on the requirements of those particular departments. I think we do need to be respectful of the fact that what National Defense needs to do is a little bit different from what CRA and ESDC need to do, which is different from what Immigration and Refugees needs to do. We do have individual mandates that will shape a little bit how the inside departmental structures are, and we need to continue to give deputies and ministers some flex in terms of how they set themselves up for success in this space. But increasingly, particularly through the medium of the talent and community team, we're going to be able to give some suggested structures on how departments should align themselves to deliver this capability. I think we're going to see IM and data coming together across the board. I think we're going to see much more alignment of chief technology officers and chief data officers. I think that for a lot of our CIOs currently, we have to take a look at them and think, are these actually chief digital officers and they can move up and be much more in touch with the business requirements? Or are they chief technology officers and they're much more in the systems and tech space And like, there's not that one's better than the other, but the folks we have right now wearing the CIO hat have a wide range of skills and a wide range of responsibilities. So we need to be a little more rigorous in terms of how those structures come together.
Okay, great. Next question. Sorry, just next question is, how involved is the data office in drafting the public privacy bill?
The public privacy bill. So we're talking about modernization of the Privacy Act here, I would assume.
That's what I got from that one, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's important to remember at the level of the federal government, there are two major pieces of legislation around privacy, right? There's the Privacy Act, which is not quite as old as I am, but getting there. It's been around for a very long time and has only really been tweaked. And there's discussion. Department of Justice has a role in terms of looking for how we're going to modernize that piece of legislation, given that, well, Jen's heard me say this before, it was written at a time when I was 12 years old and had no computer in my house, right? So there is some updating required. There's also PIPEDA, which I cannot for the life of me remember what the heck it stands for, but it is the legal framework that governs private sector. Right, and that is a different set of rules, and under the industry and science department in terms of how we regulate the use of personal data and govern privacy across the private sector here in Canada. ISAD's bringing forward some new legislation in that space shortly. So from where I stand, a bit to address some of the confusion that I think we see in the question itself, which is widespread across the country. I would like this is very much a personal view, I would like to see much greater alignment between those two pieces of legislation in terms of what the principles are and how we actually deliver this stuff. I think the principles and expectations Canadians have of companies and private enterprise are very similar to what they expect of government. There's a higher bar, no doubt, for public sector and government in this space. Because of the role we play with citizens and because of some of the coercive powers we wield. But by and large, the playing field should be similar across those two areas. So I think we need to work with Justice and the other stakeholders to make sure that those legislations are consistent with one another, and where they're different, that there's a good reason for that. Jen, do you have anything you want to add in that space? This is really your area of expertise.
I think we're fortunate enough to be working very closely with both the Department of Justice and ISAD and other stakeholders as the legislative modernizations are happening. Lots of obviously lots of considerations around how data is treated and making sure that we are enabling where we can, and start looking at services and those sorts of pieces as well. I certainly reinforce my view with Stephen that it would be very helpful if the two pieces were more closely aligned, not only for the administration of them in the federal public service, but also for Canadians to understand that their personal information is being treated in a fairly consistent manner, whether they're going through businesses or through the federal government, again with some key differences because of the mandates of the federal government. But I think that comes into the role of education. I think is really important in that, and ensuring that people understand what their privacy rights and what the responsibilities of businesses and the federal public service are.
Yeah, and maybe, Bob, if you'll permit me, the only other linkage I would make to this question is that increasingly, as not just government, but all actors in society become more digital, and we start to see more data-enabled technologies like artificial intelligence become prevalent, how your personal data is treated in those systems and how decisions are made using that data through those systems is going to become increasingly important. Certainly Benoit in the data and AI space, one of his responsibilities is overseeing the directive on automated decision making and the rule set that comes with that for federal government, and those kinds of the transparency and explainability of those tools and how they're using your data is going to increasingly become part of this landscape.
I think I can recall the shutdown of the HRDC at the time / CRA data warehouse, which was doing great work at detecting fraud, and all of a sudden shut down by the privacy commissioner. Privacy is no small consideration, and it's great that if you as a chief data officer for the government basically deals with the privacy commissioner to basically sort out, coordinate efforts, shall we say, okay? So that, I think it would be helpful to everybody. Basically, CRA just left a note and said, they're delighted. They're working on the shared governance issue and the application of metadata standards, and they're looking forward to working with you on that. Just as an aside, Treasury Board used to be very active in organizations like the Open Group. And right now, as we got standards for, I'm speaking as a member, very active member of the Architecture Forum and in the Open Group. And we have open standards for things like the data lakes, data warehouses. We're working on an information architecture guide. And that's basically addressing many of the issues that you're highlighting. Is there any thought to basically working a little bit more closely with international standards organizations? And there's an advantage to it, is if you set the standard, you're in there, then what happens is you don't have to change what you're doing. Is there any move afoot for that?
Yeah, so I think there's that comes out in a couple of aspects. One, certainly the open government team here in OCIO is still very active, and we still do a lot of work in that space. On the standards side, I think you're going to see us increasingly going in the direction of open standards, or at least shared standards through ISO and other structures. We just, Robert's team recently shepherded through a new standard for data information used in technology systems. And that it's a very short policy document. It basically says, look at standard, I can't remember what number it is, ISO standard XXY, and that's where you find the standards we're going to use for this stuff. And I think that's the way of the future on this, for exactly the reasons you set out, Bob. I think that we need to make sure that we are not considering ourselves to be so significantly different from everybody else that we have to sort of imagine our own standards in some of this space. Robert, or anything you want to add on that front?
Yeah, well, just on that ISO standard, I think one of the big decisions we made early on when we were reviewing at the time the standard on EDRMS, which was very specific, had over 274 requirements or something like that. So we're taking a more principles-based approach with high-level principles on how we want to manage information and data. And then we point to an international ISO standard that we actually procured for the government of Canada. So we have licenses available to departments. So we're making this easy, back to my theme of we need to make it easy for departments and make this work. So we bought the licenses, we have the ISO standard, but I think also on the more technical side of data, we're working very closely with open standards when it comes to various pieces. And I think, Benoit, you're probably involved in that space as well, right?
Well, absolutely. So when it comes to reference data, for example, so a list of predefined values that we use, we did work to develop a protocol for the adoption of standards within the Government of Canada. And one of the very first principles is what is already out there. And if you're proposing the development of a new standard, why is the ISO standard or the other standard is not applicable or would not be suitable? There needs to be justification for that. We noticed there was a tendency in government that whenever a standard is needed, the natural tendency was to build their own standard. But that's not productive if there's an existing standard that's suitable. So the research for appropriate standards should be at the beginning of the process. So we define the need, then we look for existing standards. And only after we've concluded that they could not be adopted for a valid reason would we go forward with development of our own Government of Canada standard. But in a lot of cases, there's suitable standards available. So that's part of our approach.
I used to joke from the defense standpoint that if I could have put a motto, had a crest and put a motto across the bottom of it for the standing up of the data practice there, I would translate the Latin, "You're not so special." Because I think that this is, I think it applies across government, right? That we have this tendency to sort of think we need to invent this stuff when the reality is chances are someone else has already got a way of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. I've got one more question for you. How soon can we expect to see draft legislation for an updated Privacy Act? Does anybody have any, do you have any idea on that?
That's a great question. All I can say is discussions are ongoing. I don't think we have an answer for that at the current point in time, but it is on the list of things I would very much like to see as well.
Okay. Well, that wraps up. We don't have any more questions from the viewers. We very much appreciate you taking the time, Stephen, Robert, Benoit, Jennifer, to come and speak. And hopefully a lot of the viewers, I think, are quite anxious to give you help. So it's not just passive viewing, as they want to contribute. So I want to thank you again very much for taking the time to present to this organization. If you have any documents or anything you want to basically, even a one page or just simply saying these are the standards that people should be cognizant of, I think that'd be very valuable, not just for our national viewers, but there's a lot of many people all over the globe listening to this recording.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that, Bob, and see what we can share in that vein. We do continue to be involved in forums like Digital Nations and whatnot. So there are things that are coming out from those places as well. But certainly, as the Secretariat, we're pushing out a variety of policies and standards that are available to see. And I really do appreciate the collaboration we're already getting across town. I can feel there's a real appetite for the stuff that we're putting up in the shop window here. So there's some great collaboration going on already.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, listen, I really appreciate your coming out and you're taking the time to present. I know you're very busy setting it up. 3 months in the job is just a start, and you have a very ambitious agenda. So thank you very much, and hope to hear from you in the future. And next year, we're already planning for next June. So that would be well, we're going to have a hybrid conference this time. We'll see how that works. So thank you very much. And that'll be the end of the session. I just want to talk to the viewers. There's going to be 3 sessions after this, followed by another plenary. There's going to be Dr. Eric Champagne on intergovernmental relations in the context of governmental digitalization initiatives. He's working very much with the Francophonie, and he's in the Ivory Coast right now. Okay, and he'll be speaking to us from there, as well as have a PhD candidate, Sylvana, who's going to be talking from Ottawa. Christian Sauvé is going to talk about enterprise architecture in smaller agencies and how that's impacting digital transformation. And then Rachel Porteous will be coming up with digital transformation of a high security organization in the era of COVID. She's CIO for FinTrack. And yes, I'll be giving a session on embedding innovation into the digital transformation. So anyways, we've got quite a bit of time now. It's time to take a little bit of a break, and we'll be starting again at 2:30 in the afternoon. Thank you very much.